Okay, folks, we're back. I'm your host, BKP. Good morning from the office. We are North Georgia's only live online morning show. We continue our candidate interviews, and with me now, joining me on the phone, our next candidate is Republican primary candidate for Georgia Insurance Commissioner Jim Beck. Mr. Beck, how are you this morning?
Good morning. Fighting a little bit of a scratchy sore throat, I think, from pollen, but excited to be with you. Heard a lot of great things about you. Watched you a number of times, and I know you hear from him everywhere you go. But Joe McCutcheon is your biggest fan.
I do believe that. Thank you for that. I do believe that. Let me double on some of our. Let me double down on some of the conversation we were talking about at the debate. And here's a question I did not get to, and I want to start right out with that. If you remember Saturday, we had a time limit. It was an hour. And in fairness to all the candidates, when I asked who had to leave, somebody needed to leave. But you had just approached something when you made some comments concerning campaign finance.
Right.
And you had just gotten into that, and I really wanted to do about a 10-minute segment on that because I had everybody's campaign finance contribution sheets up on the screen.
Gotcha.
And so there's two questions I'd like to ask of you. Do you feel, if you're the next insurance commissioner of the state of Georgia, that you would ask your legislative liaison to ask the House or to pass legislation that says you can't, insurance commissioner, or no one could take money for a campaign from someone they regulate? Would you support that?
Well, here's the way the current law reads. The current law says you can't take it from an entity you regulate. For example, an insurance agency. I couldn't take a check from an agency, like, for example, Chanda State Farm Agency. I couldn't take a check on her company. I could take one from her individually. The way a lot of people get around that, and I'm opposed to this, but the way a lot of people get around it is they have their lobbyists do it. They have the lobbyists pay on behalf of the company, and it's just, to me, it's kind of laundering it. I think we need to look with greater scrutiny. One of the things that I decided to do, and I will tell you that I've had a lot of people say, Jim, that makes no sense, but I felt led to do it, and I did it. My wife and I are financing our own campaign. We're putting in $2 million of our own money. We have taken some donations from insurance agents and friends and church members and folks we work with, but it's very important to me to be able to walk into the job and open the door and sit down and do the job. And I don't know how you can do that with your hand in the pockets of everybody who you're regulating. And so I think this is a unique opportunity for Georgia voters to have somebody in that office who isn't beholding at all. Not just in, everybody gives lip service to that. Everybody says, oh, I'm not beholding to the special interest. Make no mistake about it. If I'm elected, it'll be because I got people's votes, and because my wife and I put up our money betting on the people to do the right thing. And I think I can truly be independent that way. But absolutely, we need to look closely at that. Lobbyists giving money on behalf of clients. Let's face it, we all know where the money comes. When a lobbyist gives money, max out contribution to somebody, $6,600, we should have no illusions about where that money is coming from. It's coming from their clients, their insurance companies.
Let me. I don't want to interrupt you, but let me go back to the question just a minute. Let me go back to the question, because I have read, and for clarification for our viewers, I read the campaign finance reports. In fact, I need to get a life, I guess. But I read these things, and I do understand what you're saying. I will see, and I'm not going to say yours. I have yours in front of me. But I look at all the candidates, and, for example, you take an insurance company, and for some reason you find that everybody in the company wants to support you personally. So I understand that, and I'm not bringing you into this.
No, I understand.
But I know what you're saying. So there might be $10,000 from an insurance company, but everybody in the office, 10 people gave $1,000, but they still have to state they work for an insurance company.
That's right. That's
okay.
right.
So what you're saying is that's the loophole. So let me go back to my question. Would you, because looking at this, it's very concerning to the citizens of Georgia, that their next insurance commissioner slash fire safety be beholden to the citizens and concerned about the voters of Georgia, not the special interest. So would you make a direct answer on yes or no closing these loopholes so that no one in this office takes money from someone they regulate?
Well, I agree with you 100%. I mean, obviously, I'm putting my own money up so that I don't have to try to collect money through the back door and things like that. So I'm certainly supportive of following the spirit of the law. The problem that we get into sometimes is free speech. The Supreme Court has pretty strict limits on what you can do to limit people. So obviously, that would certainly be something worth looking at. I'm willing to do it because I'm not using their money to run. I'm using my own money, my wife's money, our family's money to run. So it poses no problem for me. I think it probably poses problems for at least one of the candidates in the race to do that. It wouldn't pose a problem for me at all.
All right, let me go another direction on something. These are my words, okay? My words. Saturday, as I told you, I never brought up the current insurance commissioner, Ralph Hudgens, okay? My words, not yours. I feel out of all the offices on the ballot for election, okay, in November, this is the one true state office that has an absolute mess in it. Those are my words. This office is a mess, according to me. I don't know about you. I have read the audit. So what say you on the status of the current office, where it is, and what you think has to be done to turn the insurance commissioner's office around if you feel it's necessary?
Well, you alluded to the audit. What really prompted the House Appropriations Committee to ask for the audit was the fact that the Georgia Department of Insurance had to furlough 200 workers and lay people off, because it ran through its money. And so the legislature said, "Hey, wait a minute, what's happening over there? You're laying people off." First time since probably 2008 that any state agencies had to furlough. You recall Sonny Perdue had to do some statewide furloughs, but this was an agency only kind of thing. And so, sure, there are absolutely problems there that have to be addressed. They're systemic problems. I wish I could say that they were problems in the last year or two. These are problems that have been going on for quite some time. Part of the difficulty with the way that their folks have been running that audit has been, or folks have been running that department has been, they have not been going back to the legislature and asking and moving through the appropriate appropriations channels. You should go to the legislature and ask for money to be appropriated to cover the needs of your programs, and not move money from one fund to another, because what that does, it sounds easier, but it's really wrong, because what you're doing is you're breaking faith with the legislature. You're supposed to go to the legislature as an agency head and say, okay, here's my mission under the law, here's what you want me to do, here's what we believe we can do it for. What would you like me to do? Because it's a partnership between the legislature and that agency. The agency doesn't operate by itself. It's a partnership. And so when you have a situation where you're not going to listen, it's hard. I've been there. It's hard to sit on the other side of the budget committee table and to justify why you're asking for what you're asking for. But that's discipline. If you can't justify it to them, you probably don't need it. And it builds a muscle that it forces discipline. And it's the closest thing we have to something that creates a situation where you're reducing fat in government because you don't have the profit motive in government like you do in private industry.
Let's take a couple of those things that you brought up. Okay, the agency has a legislative liaison. You send somebody down there at the beginning of session or somewhere throughout the year and start talking about legislation that the commissioner feels may need to be put in place for the office, for the agency. So let's go there for a minute. Now, what you're talking about is currently there's been moving, the shell game that I call it. I don't. Some say that the current insurance commissioner has moved money over from almost $8 million in fire safety, has moved that around, not used that appropriately is what I've been told. But the audit also talks about the fraud investigation division, which is supposed to have $4 million budgeted for the Services of Special Fraud program. And the current commissioner had moved $3 million of that over to administrative and only left $1 million in there. Now, here's my question that I did not get, and I'm going to say from all three candidates, I did not get a clear answer Saturday. So you're right. You're supposed to go back to the legislature and say, hey, I don't have the money to operate. Are you saying what happens in 2019 with you as the commissioner if elected? Do you go back and say, look, there's a $21.5 million budget for basically the last 3 years. What do we do to get all of these things funded properly? Do you have to raise this budget to operate this office? What say you?
Well, I think the first thing you have to do is you have to stop using the fraud money to plug holes, because that's against the law. I mean, the first thing you have to do is you have to behave properly.
Yeah, but wait a minute. If you don't take the fraud money to plug holes, I'm sorry for interrupting you, sir, but if you don't take the fraud money to plug holes, which I understand you didn't do that, it's currently been done, and if you don't take that and you push it back over, then where the money that was taken out of there went to try to cover these major raises and things that happened and positions, that's where I'm trying to get an answer. Do you have to go back and get $3 to $5 million more to operate this, to fully put everybody in place to operate this agency? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, but I mean that's what I'm saying.
No, that's fine. I'll be honest. I've started a business. I know what it's like to sign the front of a paycheck. I'm very, very reluctant to go back and ask for more money from the legislature. Now, having said that, I think the legislature would not want to have a conversation with you about more money until you had done the due diligence and said, hey, we fired these people, we moved these people around, we privatized this, we've done these things. So I think that's the first step, is to make the priority be spending what you have currently in the most judicious fashion. For example, why do we have 3 floors or 2.5 floors of real estate in downtown Atlanta? I mean, people you can have regional offices and rolling offices and have consumer service investigators. We used to send people to the courthouse. They'd sit at the courthouse and move from county to county. There's a lot of out of the box thinking that hasn't been done there that could be done. But, ultimately, once you do all the due diligence, you still have to fulfill the mandates of the office. And you owe it to the legislature to tell them, here's what we've done. Here's what we are not going to be able to do unless there's more money appropriated. But having said that, that ought to be the last result.
All right, it ought to be the last. Yeah. And let me be clear to our audience out there. This gentleman, Mr. Beck, joining us is a candidate. He is not in the office. It is an open seat. The insurance commissioner's seat in the state of Georgia is open. Current Commissioner Ralph Hudgens is not seeking re-election. So that being said, we're not talking about things that actually happened on your watch, but we're talking about things that happened. So let me just frame this, because you say it should be the last resort. The audit, 12 staffers were laid off. Okay. 212 agency workers were furloughed for 4 days, all right, to balance this budget. The audit said that in 2014 and 2017, the agency handed out more than 300 pay increases without requesting additional funding from the General Assembly. The pay increases added about $2.2 million to the agency spending in 2017, which we see in the audit, the 2.2, a big portion of that was pulled out of the fraud fund. Okay.
Right.
Now let's stay right there for a minute. What do we do in 2019? Because the budget is still $21.5 million. When you say it's the last thing, do we cut staff that maybe is not necessary in this agency? Is it overbloated? What is the answer in fitting in the 21.5 is what I can't get to. And trust me, I've asked the other candidate, and one candidate won't return my phone call. But that's what I'm asking.
He must not have liked your debate. I thought you did a fair job for everybody on Saturday. But so here's the thing. Yes, it's very possible you'll have to walk in and cut salaries. I mean, I've done that in private business. I mean, for the past 6 years, I've run an organization that exists to help people get insurance on their home and business when they can't. I can think of 3 or 4 examples where I went to somebody and said, look, I know you're making $80,000, but the job that I have now available for you to do, the reconfigured job, I can only pay you $50,000, and you know, I'm happy to let you take that job, and I'm happy to give you a letter of recommendation to move on. I mean, yeah, those are tough conversations to have, but you have to have them, and it's going to take a while. It is a mess, and it's going to take a while to clean it up. I think it'll probably take 2 legislative sessions to get the office back in the shape where it belongs, and I think we can get there, but it's going to take a while. It didn't get in a mess overnight. It's not going to be cleaned up overnight. And frankly, here's I guess what I'm trying to say, Brian. The problem is, if you walk to the legislature and say, just give me more money, you might just be putting a Band-Aid on the infection. You've got to go through the hard work of getting out what's causing the problem, cleaning out the wound, then you can start doctoring it. And my fear is that if you just went to the legislature and said, give me $5 million more, that would not be the kind of discipline you need to make sure that that infection doesn't just come right back and right back and right back. We've got to get the foundations right. My wife and I buy a good bit of rental property over the years. The first thing you do is you look under the crawl space, you make sure the foundation is solid. And we've got to get that right first. And the foundational things first is to make sure, are we appropriately staffed? Do we have people that are overpaid? Are people doing the job that they're being asked to do? Have we outsourced what we need to outsource? Are we putting too many cars on the road? Or do we have too much real estate that we're leasing? What are we paying for copy paper? On and on and on, top to bottom.
So you're saying, and point well taken. You're saying first step is just a complete review of the agency, not just go ask for the money, and you would come back to the voters here, the citizens of Georgia, and give us a report on that agency. Do you feel an outside audit needs done, or can you do it internally?
No, I think the State Department of Audit has been very independent with the audit. They're the ones that surfaced this problem. So I think they would be the State Department of Audit. Let me say this, just to give you an example of my background. I started the business at age 19 in my dorm room that I grew to 36 employees in 7 years. The business I run now had not made a profit for 4 decades until I arrived. So I know what it's like. You don't raise your prices to solve the problem. You don't cut to solve your problem. It's a combination of a variety of things. You know, it's like a family budget. You go out and pick up an extra job to make ends meet, but you also sneak your Twizzlers into the movies if you get to go to the movies. You don't buy the movie Twizzlers. You know, I mean, there's a lot of things you do. So it's a combination of both.
All right, let me move on to another subject. We've got a couple more before we close this morning. This is a paragraph out of an AJC article. Hudgens has been criticized as the auto. There's a couple things we want to look at here. Hudgens has been criticized as the auto insurance rates rose by those who thought he took too much of a hands-off approach. Last year he issued a consumer alert when Allstate filed for an average rate hike of 25%, but the commissioner wound up saying there was nothing he could do to stop it because of state law he supported when he served in the Senate. Let me box that up in a couple ways. One, I know we don't love or like to talk about regulations. There is a state law, could you explain to our voters, in the Senate that he issued a stern warning on a rate hike coming of 25%. Do you not feel that these insurance companies should not have to come through your office on rate hikes and some kind of oversight on that before the customer gets them?
That I'm glad you brought that up, because it gives me a chance to clear up some misinformation. They still have to file at the Department of Insurance.
Right, they do, yes.
Right? And what happens now is they are deemed to be okay in the commission unless the commissioner says they are not. He still has 30 days to say yes or no to that filing. And so the only difference was, think of it as opting in versus opting out. Prior to 2008, the insurance department, the insurance companies would come and say, may we use this? And he would say yes or no. Well, now what they do is they come and say, we're going to use this. And he still can say no. And that's been the problem. He hasn't said no. There's two parts to the law. There's the law and there's the implementation of the law. I tell you this, I'm all for repealing that law if that's what people want to do. But I actually think there's enough tools in the commissioner's drawer right now to try to stem some of these rate increases without adding any new laws. I mean, but because be assured, as commissioner, I'm not going to be reluctant to say no. I mean, just because you lay it on my desk and say, all right, I'm going to use this, you got 30 days to say yay or nay. No is in my vocabulary just like the word yes is.
All right, let me say this. A couple more subjects. I appreciate you, and let me know if you have to go.
No, I'm good.
Okay. Would you approve, be in favor, or would open up to look into selling or supporting if the government, if the feds say yes, supporting selling insurance across state lines?
Yes, absolutely. The challenge is, so that's a wonderful idea. The challenge is that Blue Cross Blue Shield Tennessee doesn't want to compete with Blue Cross Blue Shield Georgia because they're basically a franchise, and they operate. It'd be like one McDonald's moving in next to the other. So the problem is the law.
Yeah, but Burger King might want to move in.
Right. So here's the difference. We're basically down to, we need to think a little more creatively than just traditional insurance companies solving the problems. How about this? What if the regional hospital system wanted to get together and sell an insurance policy to a family for primary care? What if the regional hospital system wanted to take $300 a month from a husband and wife and say, okay, we'll take care of the first $25,000 or $50,000 of your medical expenses, or $100,000 of your medical expenses? What if they wanted to do that? What if a group of physicians wanted to get together and do that? We've got to change the model. We've got to the way to really get competition in place is to encourage some. For example, if the school system wanted to go and directly contract with hospitals and say, okay, all of our people live up here. We'd like you to provide the insurance for them. We'd like them to use your physician panel. And then, of course, if they use their own, there'd be a slightly less reimbursement. I think we've got to do something like that. What if the ambulance service wanted to do wellness checks on people while they were waiting for a call? I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunity to think outside the box. Cross-state line selling, absolutely. I'm for it. I would encourage it. I would promote it in any way I could. But I also want to see doctors and physicians become direct providers of services so that they can cut out the middleman of an insurance company.
Okay. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Be rude.
No,
I've got to move on. There's $8 million in this budget of $21.5 million for fire safety. You would be nominate or appoint the next fire marshal for the state. Now, on that side, there's some criticism. I'll use that word. And this is the current administration, not the one. Obviously, you're not the current commissioner. But there's some criticism in the current administration there of the agency that fire safety has not been attended to properly. Positions are not filled. There. Even to the point that there was an attempt to pass SB 319, which would move fire safety out from under this agency. Now, that being said, there's possibility of using local people to do inspections.
Oh yeah.
This agency's oversees elevators, nursing homes, hospital, courthouses, schools. In South Georgia, they do not. Now, a lot of the outlying counties of Atlanta do have the money, but a lot of South Georgia counties just do not have fire marshal funding and are in need of these services and feel they're not getting them from this agency. So you said, I want to be the one fix this. SB 319 would move it out of the way. I don't want to quote you, but you said, no, you didn't support that. You use your own words. You want to be the one to fix that area. So let's revisit that, and how do we fix that area?
So let me tell you this. That is the one area that we cannot shortchange. life and safety. I mean, that would be the one area where I would have no reluctance to go back to the legislature and say, these critical positions are not filled, here's why, and we need the resources to fill them. Because those fire inspectors inspect nursing homes, hospitals, prisons, daycare centers, you name it. And you're absolutely right. In most jurisdictions in Georgia, it's a state fire marshal. I can't tell you how many times in the time I worked in the insurance department that I would get a phone call from a school superintendent on a Thursday night that said, hey, the schools are supposed to open here on Monday, and I've got mobile classrooms that haven't been inspected. I can't get a fire marshal down here to inspect them. So it's a real problem. And nursing homes, listen, let's face it, we're living in an increasing time of aging population. Georgia has become a retirees' haven. We don't need, God forbid, a tragic nursing home fire make headlines all over the world. I mean, we've got to we can't shortchange our senior citizens. One of the things I proposed, for example, is doubling the penalties on people that commit fraud against seniors and veterans. I mean, I'm passionate about, my grandmother raised me. I'm passionate about that. And we've got to take care of people that are vulnerable, and we can't leave those positions unfilled. And that's what frustrates the fire service, is there's this feeling that they're the redheaded stepchild of that office. And that certainly should not be the case. I assure you that wouldn't be the case after I was there for a year.
Okay, let's wrap up two things. Last but not least, in 2011, it's not in 2011. This is February 22nd of this year. But Dale Russell, Fox 5 I-Team, did a story. Were you, yes or no, the chief of staff? Were you the chief of staff, insurance commissioner to Ralph Hudgens in 2011?
I was.
You was. Okay. Now, I understand your personnel file doesn't reflect this because Hudgens wrote in your personnel file that current commissioner that invaluable leadership and Jim will be sorely missed.
Gave me a proclamation in my honor and a going away party and a cake.
Okay. Then Commissioner Hudgens, who has supported another candidate for insurance commissioner, it sounds like you had a little bit of a bad split with him. He said, being honest with him and the industry group, I told him he needed to find something else to do. I totally lost confidence in him, Hudgens told Dale Russell. I told him he needed to find something else. And it said, I'm pretty much sounds like a firing. Did that exchange not take place with you and the current commissioner? And what happened to that position with you in the insurance commission agency?
It never happened. That exchange never happened. The commissioner is rewriting history. That's why people hate politics. He's rewriting history. Here's a guy who gave me a going-away party and a proclamation in my honor and has said nothing but great things about me publicly. His wife collaborated with me on a book I wrote for consumers about insurance. She collaborated on the budgeting chapter. I considered him a friend. I was shocked when I saw that on TV because it just didn't happen. And the commissioner is desperate to get his hand-picked successor put into that job. Frankly, the industry is desperate. You alluded to the financial disclosures. I mean, I don't have insurance company lobbyists maxing out to me, nor do I want them.
You don't have them maxing out. Wait a minute. You don't have them maxing out. But do you have any lobbyist contributions to?
I have no insurance company lobbyist contributions.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me say this. It does say in this report, it does say that you sent Dale Russell the 2011 proclamation signed by Commissioner Hudgens, saying what a great job you had done in the department.
Yeah, I was shocked.
And it does go on to say, it sounds like he has endorsed. Obviously, he has concerning the campaign finance. The Friends of Hudgens has actually
maxed out.
Yeah, maxed out to another candidate. But that being said, so you didn't that exchange did not happen.
Never happened.
All right, but it said you went on to be general manager for a private insurance company called Georgia Underwriting Associate. Are you general manager there? Are you the owner? Who are you?
No. I have stepped down from that position to run for office. That organization is an organization that exists to provide insurance to people in their homes and businesses if they can't get it in the voluntary market. So, for example, if you're denied coverage, and a lot of times people can be denied coverage because of their credit, then Georgia Underwriting exists for that purpose. I was elected by the board to be their general manager in the fall of 2011, and I assumed my position there January 2nd, 2012. And that's the company that I led that had not made a profit in 40 years and then is now profitable.
All right. So who is Georgia Underwriting's associate? Because it says Jim C. Beck, Sr., President, and $4,260 in kind for mileage. So is this still something? I mean, you stepped down, but are you still associated with Georgia Underwriters Associates?
I'm sorry, in mileage, $4,200 a mile. What now?
Well, no, I'm looking at the campaign finance because at the same time, I'm sorry, at the same time you're telling me you stepped down as a general manager. Is this not the same Georgia Underwriting Association that is on your campaign finance report? And it is an in-kind contribution on mileage for $4,260.
No, that's a personal contribution. I'm the employee. At the time, I was an employee, and I gave my money to put gas in the car.
Okay, because it said, well, this is... Yeah, but this is your campaign contribution. It says you're the
president. But listen to me, Brian.
I'm listening. I don't want to misrepresent anything.
That was filed. This is a big deal you're into. I'm still technically on the payroll till the end of April.
Okay.
I was the president at the time that was filed. I put gas in my own car.
Fine.
And I was required to explain, and let's get this right. I was required to say who I worked for. That's who I worked for.
I understand.
Nope. They didn't make a contribution to me.
No.
My wife and I put the gas in the car.
No. It's in kind, and I respect. I respect your answer.
No, it's not in kind from them. I was their employee.
No, it's in kind from you.
From me, but I was their employee at the time.
Okay, I got it. No. I was just going through here giving you an opportunity because I have been because I see Georgia Underwriters Associate, Jim Beck, President, advertising with the newspaper. That's your occupation that you're listed as. I understand you have to list your occupation. Okay. And no, sir. I'm not trying to draw a conclusion on your campaign finance. It is something because you said you have lent the campaign a couple $1 million to run this. So, and I'm not trying to highlight anything negative where that's concerned. So
no, I appreciate that. Georgia Underwriting appears, but only because that was my employer at the time we filed the report.
Yes, you do have to. You have to
say who you work for.
Okay, all right. Because I have looked extensively at the other one, and I do know who maxed out Friends of Hudgens, and I happen to say you didn't make the Friends of Hudgens list.
No, I did not. I don't think I will.
That I will give you. You did not make the Friends of Hudgens list on your campaign finance.
I don't think I'll get invited to the Christmas party.
Well, Mr. Beck, I've enjoyed having you on the show.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate you just letting me come out with the questions and taking one by one and answering those. Would you like to make any kind of final statement to the voters before we close this morning?
Check out my website, Jim Beck for Georgia. It has my day one priorities. I'm clearly not the pick of the current commissioner. I'm clearly not the pick of the insurance industry. But I offer a blend of public and private sector service, and frankly, I'm putting my own money on the table so that I can go in there hands untied, unfettered, and do the job for the people of Georgia.
Thank you for giving us all this time, sir. We greatly appreciate it. You have a nice day. Okay, folks, that concludes our interview with Republican primary candidate Jim Beck for insurance commissioner in the state of Georgia. We're going to take a brief break and come back and wrap up the show.